Welcome to the SkillTorch Disrupt Podcast, where we dive into the world of innovation and technology. My name is Malika, and I am the CEO and founder of a recruitment company that is focused on the AI space across the globe. Today, I have with me Viraj, who is the co-CEO of Cornerstone AI. He's joining us to talk to us a bit more about the data ecosystem in the healthcare industry. Viraj, great to have you on here.
Yeah, Malika, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. Well, it would be great if you can tell our audience a bit more about yourself, your background, and what brought you to the journey into Cornerstone.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a decision scientist by training, MBA. And prior to joining Cornerstone, my last two experiences were leading data and services businesses in the healthcare space.
Nice.
So one of them was at a larger company called McKesson. One was at a smaller company, startup called Coda. And it was at the former at McKesson where I really got exposed to this healthcare data cleaning problem in a really personal way. I was probably your classic business person that was like, the data's not clean. It's sort of like the plumbing of a house, right? You assume
Yeah.
that when you turn on the faucet, it comes on at the right temperature, it comes on immediately, and it's available. And it was at McKesson where I had 25 biostatisticians that were spending the majority of their time doing this task called data cleaning. Then I had over 10 data scientists spending a good chunk of their time doing data cleaning. And then I had all of these ambitions to build new products, new data products. And when I met with the product manager and I looked at the timeline, the long pole in the tent, the longest step in the process was this thing called data cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
And so that led me down this rabbit hole of learning more about the problem. And what I found out was that this idea of data cleaning is something that has had zero innovation in healthcare
Yeah.
forever. And it's done very manually. It includes steps like standardizing data, deduplicating data, merging data sets. And it's done by these highly trained technical people, like
Mm-hmm.
PhDs in some instances. And so as I learned more about it, I realized that this problem was not unique to me as a data company, but actually pretty more widespread. It included healthcare consulting companies, it included pharmaceutical companies, where everyone was sort of attacking this issue in this manual way. And I met a brilliant set of technical folks that had equally been frustrated with this problem. They were the actual technical people that were doing this data cleaning work and were frustrated by it. And they wanted to change it. They wanted to fix it and make it better. And so I joined Cornerstone AI in March of this year to help them take this better solution, an AI-based solution to fixing this problem. Saving these people time, these technical people time, and so they can focus on like the more meaningful stuff, which is actually
Yeah.
advancing science for patients.
Wow. I mean, it is an ongoing problem, isn't it? I mean, I remember when I was getting my healthcare insurance in the US, in the US, they're still using fax machines to kind of like
Yeah.
distribute data and information. I mean, there is no fax machines in the UK right now, but in the US, it's so old school. And I'm not surprised everything gets duplicated or lost. They probably still have my information from with my old addresses and stuff.
Yeah, probably actually.
Gosh. And again, that really affects people who want to make a claim, get their medical bills paid for, even get referrals. Yeah, it's a big problem.
It's a massive one, and it's it's a massive one. At the same time, it's a little bit hidden. It's not as
Yeah.
visible as you would think.
No, I completely get that. I mean, give us a sense a bit more about the healthcare data ecosystem. Like, why is it so complex, and generally, like, what is involved in that?
Yeah, sure. So the healthcare data ecosystem has a couple of things that are really unique about it. When you think about
Mhm.
data, in healthcare versus, let's say, consumer data or financial data, there's a couple of things that are particularly unique to healthcare data. So one is that it's really valuable information. You're talking about billing. You could be talking about like a clinical piece of information that's very meaningful for a patient. So one thing is it's very valuable information. The second is that there are a number of different applications. There's not just one application you're using healthcare data for. It could be something that is meant to be at the point of care for a patient. It could be informing a payer of a reimbursement. It could be for research. So first thing, valuable. Second thing, different set of applications. And then the third thing I would say is that makes it unique is that it really comes from a variety of different sources. There's not one source of healthcare data. And so when you think about those things together and like the overall ecosystem, you've got on the left-hand side of this where the data is being generated, and then on the right-hand side, folks that are using that information. And on the left-hand side, you've got, let's call them sources of origin or originators. So in healthcare, places that data is generated include things like your phones, like you're taking steps every day, your Apple Watch. It also includes things like electronic medical records. It includes things like pharmacy data. Then you have, as you move from the left more to the right, you have companies that are pooling data together. They might be bringing EMR data with claims information. And then as you move all the way to the right, then you have companies that are service companies. Sometimes in healthcare, these are like consulting companies that are providing services on top of the data. And then you've got like the final consumer who's like actually using that, whether that be a patient, a payer, or a provider. And so when you think about the complexity of the healthcare ecosystem, it's like this is really at the core of we've got all of these different places that information is gathered. You've got all of these steps or chains of custody along the way, and there's no one accountable for the plumbing. That's why it needs to get fixed.
I think that's bizarre, right? So you mentioned like people with PhDs and very talented people that are being tasked with doing data cleansing. I mean, that's very demoralizing, very demotivating for them to do something like that. And actually, to this day, like you said, it's happening quite a lot.
It's happening a lot, and it's one of those things where when you keep doing things the way that you've been doing things, it has a way of inertia. It has a way of, especially when you add like large organization dynamics to that, things don't change, even though they should. And yeah, I mean, can you imagine going to get a PhD in a topic like biostatistics? And then you're spending the majority of your time doing this thing called data cleaning. Like you didn't go to get your PhD to be spending your time doing data cleaning. That certainly was not your goal when you're going to graduate school.
And it should be a really simple process, really, data cleansing, right? Like you said, I'm surprised that you guys have obviously like launched this tool to really create this issue, but it's a very simple fix, right? That could have been solved a while ago.
One of the things that there are some reasons why I think it has not been fixed. So one is that this information in healthcare, it did just get digitized, let's say in the past decade or so, in a really meaningful way, at least in the States. So you have the Affordable Care Act, which put in place that providers in the US had to, adopt electronic medical records. You had things like the 21st Century Cures Act, which encouraged different players within the ecosystem to share information more broadly. And then you had, as a result of that, a bunch of companies that were trying to get this information out of what was previously trapped. And And then you had things like cloud infrastructure, which again, just in the past decade emerged and provide the ability to store a lot of this information at scale. And so like that's all conditions that make this actually the timing very ripe for disrupting the way that we've attacked this pervasive what is a very pervasive problem with an AI based solution. So could you have done this 10 years ago? Maybe, but I don't even think the problem would be as dramatic as
Yeah.
it is now. There are certain things about like right now that have happened over the past decade that
Like
make it,
COVID.
yeah, like COVID is another a great example of that, where you have openness now to embracing new tools. You have you've got this focus on I, I think a different mental model, and then of course like the trends with OpenAI and the focus, like there's a greater attention than ever
Yeah.
on AI based solutions as a means to being more effective as organizations.
Yeah. What are the sort of the consequences that I mean, I think you've touched on this a little bit already, and I think it's, somewhat obvious, but what consequences have you come across with the fact that some of the data isn't being cleansed, and perhaps, maybe some case studies you can share where you've actually solved this with some of your clients?
Yeah, I'll give you an example of a concerning one,
Mm-hmm.
a concerning thing that we found, and then I will give you an example of that I think really spells out how we improve the current process. So I would say in general, like one of my own pet peeves about the AI space right now is that there's so much buzz and
Yeah.
there's not enough focus on
Mm-hmm.
what is the job that you're performing that is more effective than the current way of doing things. In my opinion, the companies that are going to sustain in the AI space will be performing a job more effectively than the current way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And a great example of this, one of our main customers is biopharma companies, and they perform often these data quality assessments. And these data quality assessments are often done by these technical, highly trained folks within the
PhD.
organization, PhDs in
Yeah.
biostatistics. They're either existing within the organization, or I would say that's like 2/3 of the time. And then maybe 1/3 of the time, there might be a consulting company performing these. Guess what? They're hiring these technically trained people to
Mm-hmm.
do these in the old way. And so, with one of our customers, they shared with us that it took them 10 weeks to produce a single data quality assessment with their current process. With our system, we could produce the same report in a day. So, 10
Wow.
weeks to a day. In the current process, they got these static reports that did not have that much depth. With our solution, they had an elegant UI that they could go in and double click on certain areas of interest and real time see the problems that they wanted to look at in a deeper way. And candidly, like we're able to do it for less from a cost perspective too. And so that I think is one. When I think about the job being performed, what we want
Yeah.
to do is ultimately we want to do things faster, we want to do things more comprehensively, and we want to bring down the cost. And the more that we can do that, the more we can also say that we're having a real impact on these
Mm-hmm.
organizations. I'll give you one other example that I thought was really more on the concerning side. And so we had one of the things our system does. I mentioned data quality assessments. You can think of that as sort of a module within the system. Another area of focus is the idea of finding errors in a more intelligent way or
Mm-hmm.
anomalies within a data set. We were working with a registry. Registry is sort of a way of gathering patient information over time and longitudinally collecting it as the disease progresses and seeing the outcomes. And this registry was in prostate cancer, and it had gone through a set of internal checks within the company that was producing the data before it got to us. And what we found that was very concerning is that if you had not run the additional AI-based checks through our system, you would have actually thought that there was a treatment effect with a subgroup within this population. In this instance, it was the African American population.
Okay.
And that treatment effect in reality did not exist.
Wow.
And so I bring this up as a concerning example because I think about, well, how often is this happening? Where in the absence of having a more intelligent way of checking for errors, you're coming up with conclusions in your research that are actually not true conclusions. And so that would be an example that I think is more on the quality side that is really important for us to be looking at, and to bringing new approaches to making sure at the end of the day in healthcare, the stakes are so high because we're talking about patients that
And their
we don't really
livelihood.
have room, to make these kinds of mistakes.
Yeah. So, again, I'm not trying to hold you to it, but obviously you've got other companies so I used to work at Experian Data Quality. And actually, one of the accounts that I used to manage at the time was NHS, which is basically National Health Hospitals in the UK. So Experian Data Quality, that their job is basically doing data cleansing. How are you guys sort of having an impact on those kind of companies that exist today? Are you doing something? I'm sure you're doing something very different, but yeah, what impact and how different is it for what those players are doing?
I'm not super familiar with how that company or organization, I should say, NHS is not a company; they're public government
Yeah,
organization.
they are. Yeah.
I would say that almost everywhere that I've observed, everyone is conducting these data cleansing steps manually, which means they're technical people applying manual rules to data. It's highly operational and it's slow.
Mm-hmm.
And these teams are looking for a better way of working through the data cleaning steps.
Yeah.
And so most of what our opportunity and challenge is that in most instances, we are convincing, it's not that we're competing against another organization that has a different or alternative approach, but rather we're convincing people that they can do the steps that they've been doing more effectively than they have. And they've been doing this for a long time,
Yeah, of course.
So that on itself is both, again, like a major challenge as well as a major opportunity. We often find that the key moment in them getting belief that there is a better way is when we can show them with their own data. So, or the data that they're often working with. When we can show them we can produce the same output with their own data, but that much faster and with a more comprehensive view, that usually is the moment where they're like, okay, we need to consider this alternative. But until then, there's usually a healthy dose of skepticism of, can you do this? Can you, I'm not sure if but then some folks are like, I don't want to change, right? Like there's a healthy portion of folks that are very resistant to change when you're asking them to do something different. So that's where we spend a decent amount of our time thinking about is how do we convince those stakeholders in a way that respects their own mental model of the world, which has not changed in a long time.
Yeah. No, again, the challenge still persists today, right? And as you mentioned earlier with AI, yes, it's a buzzword, but actually, how are people utilizing it right now? And that's the challenge, right? And I think that that's what you guys are trying to solve, is actually putting that into practice, essentially. Outside of healthcare, how are you guys impacting data companies?
We're exclusively in healthcare.
Okay, so you're not actually working with.
But you. Okay, I think I know.
Yeah,
I think your
yeah,
question's more on how are we helping healthcare data companies?
that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So our technology, we spent a lot of time talking about the pharmaceutical application of the technology. Um, the technology also is very applicable to healthcare data companies. So just to define what that means, these are companies that are putting together multiple data sets. They are selling often to pharmaceutical companies these aggregated, pooled, um, and curated data sets. They could be coming from different sources. They might be coming from laboratory data or claims information or EMR data. And where we often find that these data companies are interested in our solution is around standardizing data. The way that standardization of healthcare data works today is, again, this is gonna sound very familiar, but it's very manual in nature. And the standardization of healthcare data involves applying a series of rules to the data to
Right.
get it into a standardized format. And to give you an example of what standardized means, there's a set of healthcare data dictionaries. So, for example, you're probably familiar with like ICD code. In lab, there's a dictionary called LOINC. And for each one of these, if the I'll give you like a little example of this. So like, let's say that you're interested in looking at diabetes patients and you're answering a question of how many diabetes patients do I have? And let's say that there's some ICD code that a doctor enters that says this is a diabetes patient. Um, and let's say that that exists within a column, and there's rows within this column, and let's say there's 10 rows. And let's say for 6 of the rows, you've got that standard code for a diabetes patient. But for the other 4, let's say that it's an incorrect coding. Let's say in some instances, maybe there's some text information that was entered in there. If you are answering a question where you want to know how many diabetes patients exist, it's very problematic if 4 of those rows, like what do you do with those 4 rows?
Mm.
And so what our system would do is look at, for those 6 rows, it will, as well as those 4 rows, it will look at the information in that specific column and row relative to all the other information that exists within that data set and make a prediction as to, is this indeed is this patient a diabetes patient? And we will produce a second column for the customer that says, this is the prediction that our system has, as well as the confidence associated with that prediction. And so for your end customer, you can go from, okay, maybe let's say in the current state, they had 6 of those patients that were confirmed as diabetes patients. In future state, maybe you find out that 8 of those patients are indeed diabetes patients. You're able to validate the existing coding of the original ICD codes. You're also able to identify errors. So maybe one of those patients was indeed not a diabetes patient and it was miscoded. And you can increase the volume of overall number of patients that are actually coded. Again, because these
Right.
are manual rules. So the data companies are often interested in our standardization module because they're interested in 3 things. One, they want to increase the volume of patients because manual rules tend to cut off patients on the ends. 2, they're interested in increasing the depth of the patients that they have access to. So
Okay.
they may support, let's say, 50 labs today, but they could support with an AI-based solution 400 labs. And then 3, they're interested in validating their current methodology. Are we accurate? Are we not accurate? Where our system is really helpful is saying, okay, let's do a cross comparison of what you had done for standardization assignments versus a third party.
Right. Great. No, thanks for obviously providing us with that overview. So just to sort of like conclude, what is next for you guys at Cornerstone? I think it's quite a lot you're doing right now. I know you just started a few months ago. So yeah, what are sort of the growth plans for the rest of this year, and what are you guys up to?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really focused on getting our system deployed at some really key customers through the end of this year, including on the data company side as well as the pharmaceutical company side. So that's really where we're laser focused through the end of the year. And longer term, our goal is, again, thinking about that analogy of the plumbing of the house, we want to help fix this data cleaning problem, this plumbing problem within healthcare,
Yeah.
and become a trusted third-party utility that can enable each of these players across that healthcare data ecosystem from origination to the actual end consumers.
Exciting stuff. Well, I look forward to tuning in and seeing what you guys are up to. But I think you're doing this for a really good cause as well. End of the day, healthcare is a priority, and end of the day, you're not only you're going to save someone's life, but you're going to make sure, the right sort of communication is going after. And as you said, it's a constant problem. So hopefully, you guys can at least make a huge impact and at least eliminate most of what's happening.
Thanks, Malika. I really enjoyed the conversation and would be great to check in.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.